Alright, hey everyone, for today's video I want to talk about the newest upcoming game from Atlus, Metaphor ReFantazio. Specifically things related to the combat system, cause of course my channel is pretty combat focused, but I will have more general tips in the last section. Metaphor combines a blend of Persona, SMT, as well as its own unique systems. I want to go over how the combat system generally plays, how archetypes work, and a lot more. Now, this information is solely coming from the demo that was released recently, not the full game, as it's all I have access to. If you fully complete the demo, most things mentioned in this video will already be known, but I thought I would condense things into a digestible format, and it can still be useful as a refresher. So starting off, combat in Metaphor uses the familiar press turn system found in mainline SMT games. If you played any of them, such as SMT5 Vengeance that released earlier this year, you will feel very at home with how the combat works. But if you're solely a Persona head, let me give you a quick rundown. Every fight begins with your team having press turns at the top of the screen, one for each party member you have deployed. Using a skill normally will consume one press turn, but if you hit a weakness or land a critical hit, only half of the press turn icon will be consumed. Therefore, to get the most amount of actions per turn, you want to be hitting weaknesses or landing crits as often as possible. Enemies will generally have one press turn per foe, except on hard mode where they get one additional one. Press turns have some additional properties. You can pass on an ally's turn, letting another teammate go, and this will only consume half of an icon. If you miss your attack, instead of it costing one press turn, it will cost two. And if you hit into Repel or Absorb, your team will lose all of its turn icons. The same thing applies for enemies, so this can be used to shut down enemy actions. Moving on, Metaphor does offer a mix of real-time and turn-based combat. When approaching enemies, you generally want to break their gauge before entering combat. This will let you do some free damage and have enemies be stunned, which makes them take a turn to recover. If you sneak attack an enemy from behind, you can break their gauge much quicker. There is a way to lock on to certain enemies with the L button, and if you're higher level, you can defeat enemies just by mashing the attack button. One thing that is pretty unique is how much your weapon matters for damage. In previous titles, your weapon attack was only considered for melee damage, and the only way for it to affect skills was if it had a useful passive. But in Metaphor, both physical and magic skills depend a fair bit on your weapon attack for damage. This means upgrading your weapons often will be much more important. Another concept in Metaphor is the use of formations. Party members can be placed in the front line and the back line, which have different positives and negatives. Frontline characters do more damage with melee and physical attacks, but take more damage from enemies. Backline characters are the opposite, being less proficient in melee and physical, but having better survivability. Magic damage does not get lowered for backline characters. Therefore, putting your physical heavy hitters in the front row and mages or supports in the back row can be an obvious strategy. In addition, if you want to have a character guard for a turn, positioning them in the back row can help. But there will be more ways to use this mechanic. For example, there seems to be a gunner archetype that deals physical damage but may not have the backline penalty. Try experimenting, and it's good to know that you can preset formations in the menu so you don't have to shuffle characters around every fight. I've already mentioned archetypes a bit, but now I'll go more into depth on them as they are the main method of customization in Metaphor. Archetypes can kind of be thought of as personas or just classic job classes from previous RPGs. They are equipable forms that let your characters have access to different attacks, buffs, affinities, you name it. One cool thing about Metaphor is that changing archetypes is not exclusive to only the main character. Any party member can switch what archetype they are using as long as you have it unlocked for them, and this can be done at any time outside of combat using the menu. This means your team has a ton of flexibility in how you want to set things up. Want one of your teammates to be a physical damage dealer? Just switch them to the warrior archetype. Run into a boss that is very weak to magic? Try switching a couple characters to mage. I do think as the game progresses, certain characters will be more suited to certain archetypes due to their base stats and what gear they can use, but this still allows for a lot of variability. As this is based on the demo, not every archetype has been unlocked yet, but I'll quickly go over some of the early game ones so you can get a sense of how they differ. The first one you get is Seeker, which acts as kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, having wind magic, healing, and buffs. Wow, an early game character that uses wind and healing? Never seen that one before. The next archetype is Warrior, which focuses on physical damage and critical hits. It's a common theme in recent Atlus titles that physical ends up being very good, so don't be surprised if Warrior is one of the best classes at the end of the game. Mage is your classic magic class, getting a number of elemental attacks. Knight focuses more on defense and survivability, but has some synergy with Warrior. The Healer archetype, as you could guess, offers heals, ailment cleanse, and removing debuffs. These are just a few of the archetypes in the game. There seems to be 14 base ones, and then as you progress, they can evolve into an adept or elite form depending on the archetype. So Seeker can change into Magic Seeker and eventually Soul Hacker, presumably unlocking different abilities at each stage. This makes the game have 40 total different archetypes, so there will be many to choose from. Archetypes are not only bound to the skills they learn via level up. You can also use the skill inheritance feature to transfer skills from other archetypes if they have been unlocked. So for example here, if I want my warrior to have Tarukaja, I can pay Mag, which is a currency you get from completing fights, in order to transfer it from the Seeker. This lets you customize your archetypes even more, and you'll likely want to keep leveling different archetypes if they have a skill you'd like to transfer. Luckily, you don't have to grind every single one, as there are items that give archetype EXP. One final thing, certain archetypes can work very well together because of the existence of synthesis skills. These are very powerful skills that cost multiple press turns and are only usable if you have the matching archetypes in your party. They also consume the MP of both members when used. So for example, this skill Jump Thrust does a lot of damage and lowers the enemy's defense by one stage, but it is only usable when both Knight and Warrior are in the team. It seems the strongest skills in the game will end up being the synthesis ones, so definitely take these into consideration when building your party. For normal encounters, you usually won't need them, but for tougher bosses, they will likely be pretty important. A few miscellaneous combat stuff before the stats section. Buffs and debuffs in this game can actually stack up to 3 stages. This is different from the usual 1 stage in Persona titles and 2 stages that SMT5 had, making it more similar to older titles. And one major change, the main character can actually fall in combat, and it does not mean a game over. Your other party members can still finish the fight, so you don't have to be as worried about the MC. Okay, another aspect that is similar to mainline SMT is the allocation of stat points. Your MC will naturally gain stat points at each level, but you will additionally get 1 point to put into any stat you want. Strength is for physical damage, Magic is for magic, Endurance makes you tankier, Agility affects evasion and hit chance, while Luck affects item acquisition, critical hits, and ailments. Of course, we don't have full game knowledge to know what is 100% the best usage of points, but we can make some assumptions. Generally in these games, putting all your points in your main attacking stat is the way to go. As for whether Fizz or Magic is better, the read from early data mines seems to suggest Physical will again be the highest damage option late game, which isn't super surprising considering recent Atlus titles. But if you like Magic builds, I'm sure that route will work perfectly fine too, and we will need further confirmation on what's really the best. One thing to note in Metaphor, because your weapon attack matters a fair bit for both physical and magic skill damage, it's likely you'll still be able to do a good amount of magic damage even while putting points in strength. Regardless, for stats, I'd say don't overcomplicate things, just put points in your main attacking stat. Alright, that was it for combat, now on to more general tips. Metaphor does have a calendar system, meaning time progresses as you play. There is a day and night cycle, and nights become unavailable if you do a dungeon during the day. You will be spending time mainly in 2 ways, to rank up your followers and increase your royal virtues. Followers are of course this game's version of social links, letting you learn more about a character and gain bonuses over time. While royal virtues are social stats that increase from certain tasks and allow you to unlock different quests or progress a certain follower's rank. One of the best virtues to rank up right away is Wisdom, as it unlocks a special dungeon and allows for the church to purify any weapons or armor you have. To do this as quickly as possible, on the first day you can make choices yourself, go to this merchant and accept his cooking request. then fetch some ingredients from the town. Go to a bench and watch the street as it gives wisdom. During the night, cook anything at the inn. The following day, turn in the quest and you should have wisdom rank 2. Then you can talk to this white-haired lady, unlock the goblin dungeon, and you have full access to the church. One of the earliest missable items is the Dragon's Judgment sword. This is the best sword you can get early game, but it is only available if you slay the sleeping dragon. You can either stealth your way past this section, or choose to fight the dragon, which will result in you getting this sword. The dragon is weak to ice, so it may be worth putting Grius as a mage, and attacking with MC and Scroll as warrior. It is a challenging fight, so you could still skip it and use other weapons. And after the demo section, it might be possible to come back to this area, or there will be better weapons fairly soon after. Speaking of missables, one of the rare items seems to be Golden Beetles. It is not currently known what exactly these are for, but there is an achievement for completing all exchanges using them, so it seems they may be traded for important items. There seems to be only 2 missable beetles in the demo, one at your campsite with Stroll and Grius, and one other in the Goblin Dungeon. The others can be returned to at any time, and there seems to be 5 total in the demo section. If you're not a completionist, I wouldn't worry too much about these, but something to keep in mind. Lastly, some miscellaneous tips. There is a shop in the corner of town that is only available at night. It sells items you normally won't find elsewhere. And speaking of shops, they have discounts on the last day of the week, so it may be wise to purchase more expensive items then. Okay, that was all I had for this guide. There is definitely more I could talk about, but I did want to keep this video somewhat concise, and hopefully you found some helpful tidbits throughout. I've had a lot of fun with Metaphor so far, and I'll definitely be making videos about the game, so like and subscribe to support the channel and not miss out on any. Until then, see you.